Calla woke to fire beneath her skin. The cottage was still dark, dawn an hour away, but the burning pulled her from sleep with a gasp. She sat up, heart hammering, and pressed her right wrist against her chest. Heat pulsed there, steady and insistent, like a second heartbeat layered over her own. She knew what it was before she looked. The mate mark. Her breath caught as she lifted her arm into the narrow band of moonlight slanting through the window. Silver lines traced across her inner wrist, delicate as lace, unmistakable as a brand. The pattern was beautiful and terrible all at once. Vines that twisted into the shape of a crescent moon, small stars scattered at the edges, and at the center, a single wolf in mid-leap. She stared at it, frozen. This was impossible. She had rejected him. Last night, in front of the entire pack, she had looked Alpha King Cassian in the eye and said no. She had felt the weight of his disappointment, the silence that followed, but she had held her ground. She was an orphan, with no family name, no rank, no place in his world. She had done the right thing, so why was his mark burning on her skin? Calla pressed her thumb over the design, hard enough to hurt, but the silver only brightened under the pressure. She bit her lip and pulled her hand back. It did not fade. It did not blur. The mark sat there, vivid and whole, as though it had always been part of her. Her wolf stirred beneath her ribs, smug and quiet. Calla closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. She could hide it. She had to. If anyone saw this, they would ask questions she could not answer. They would assume she had changed her mind, that she had gone to him in secret, that she wanted this. She did not want this. She pulled a long-sleeved shirt from the chair beside her bed and tugged it on, rolling the cuffs down twice to cover her wrists. The fabric was soft cotton, cream-colored and worn thin from years of use. It would have to be enough. By the time the sun rose, Calla had convinced herself she could manage it. She braided her hair, dark and thick, over one shoulder. She splashed cold water on her face and studied herself in the small mirror above the basin. Her eyes were the color of amber in daylight, gold-flecked and bright, but this morning they looked tired. Shadows sat beneath them like bruises. She was small-boned and lean, built for speed rather than strength, and the shirt hung loose on her frame. She looked like what she was, a woman with no one and nothing. Except now she had a mark she did not ask for. She made her way to the main hall as the breakfast bell rang. The pack gathered there each morning, a tradition Cassian had kept since taking the throne. It was meant to foster unity, he said, to remind everyone they were family. Calla had always felt like a guest at someone else's table. The hall was already full when she arrived. Long wooden tables stretched the length of the room, crowded with people passing plates and pouring tea. The ravitareso. Air smelled of bread and honey and coffee. Voices rose and fell in easy rhythm, laughter echoing off the stone walls. She kept her head down and slid into a seat near the end of one table, as far from the Alpha's dais as she could manage. A woman across from her smiled, warm and open. Her name was Marin, a healer with kind eyes and silver streaking her brown hair. She had been one of the few who did not look at Calla with pity after last night. "Morning," Marin said, pushing a basket of rolls toward her. "You sleep all right?" Calla nodded and reached for the bread, careful to keep her sleeve down. "Well enough." Marin poured her a cup of tea, steam curling between them. "People are still talking, you know. About last night." Calla's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression calm. "Let them talk. They don't understand why you said no." Marin's voice was gentle, not accusing. "He's a good man, Calla. A good alpha." "I know." Calla wrapped both hands around the warm mug and met Marin's gaze. "That's why I said no." Marin tilted her head, studying her. "You think you're not good enough." It was not a question. Calla looked away. "I think I'm being realistic." Marin opened her mouth to reply, but someone called her name from the other end of the table. She sighed and rose, squeezing Calla's shoulder as she passed. "You're braver than you think," she said quietly. Calla did not feel brave. She felt like a coward hiding behind cotton sleeves. She ate in silence, forcing herself to chew and swallow though the bread tasted like dust. Around her, the hall buzzed with life. Children ran between the tables, their laughter bright and wild. Elders sat near the fire, trading stories. Warriors crowded the benches closest to the dais, their voices loud with teasing and challenge. And at the center of it all, Cassian. He sat at the high table, tall and steady, his presence a gravity that pulled every eye. He was broad-shouldered and strong, built like the warriors he led, but there was a stillness to him that set him apart. His hair was dark, clipped short, and his eyes were pale gray, the color of winter sky. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, old and faint, and his jaw was shadowed with stubble. He wore simple clothes, no crown, no ceremony, just a man breaking his fast with his people. But Calla could feel the alpha in him, even from across the room. It was in the way others leaned toward him when he spoke, the way silence fell when he stood. It was in the careful way he listened, the patience in his hands when he passed a plate or refilled a cup. He had asked her to be his mate, and she had broken his heart in front of everyone. She pulled her sleeve down again, panic rising in her chest. "Calla!" She flinched and looked up. A young man stood beside her, one of the pack runners. His name was Finn, barely 20, with red hair and freckles scattered across his nose. He was breathless, as though he had been hurrying. "Alpha wants to see you," Finn said. Her throat went dry. "Now?" "After breakfast." Finn shifted his weight, uncomfortable. He said not to make you rush, just when you're ready. Calla forced herself to nod. "Tupiala. Thank you." Finn hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Is it true?" he asked, voice low. "That you turned him down?" She met his eyes, steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Yes." Finn stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head and walked away. The tea had gone cold in her hands. Calla set the cup down and stood, her appetite gone. She could feel eyes on her now, curious and confused. Word had spread fast. Of course it had. Nothing stayed secret in a pack this size. She made her way toward the side door, keeping her head high and her sleeves low. She just needed to get outside, to breathe, to think. But as she passed one of the long tables, a hand reached out and caught her wrist. Not hard, not cruel, just enough to stop her. Calla froze. The grip was firm and warm, and when she looked down, she saw the sleeve had ridden up. The silver mark gleamed in the firelight, unmistakable. The woman holding her wrist sucked in a sharp breath. "Blessed moon," she whispered. Silence spread outward like ripples on water. One by one, conversations died. Heads turned. Eyes found the mark on Calla's wrist, bright and whole and burning. Someone whispered Cassian's name. Calla yanked her arm free and stumbled back, heart pounding. She pulled the sleeve down with shaking hands, but it was too late. They had seen it. All of them. The hall had gone deathly quiet. And then, from the high table, Cassian rose. His gaze found hers across the room, pale and unreadable, and the air between them seemed to hum with something old and immovable. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who had been waiting. Calla's wolf whined low in her chest, and she realized with cold, creeping certainty that everything had just changed. The mark was visible now. The pack had seen it, and pack law was absolute. She had rejected him last night, but her wolf had claimed him first. Calla did not wait for him to reach her. She turned and pushed through the side door, out into the cool morning air, her pulse thundering in her ears. The garden lay beyond the hall, a sprawl of stone paths and wild roses that had been left to grow as they pleased. She headed for the farthest corner, where a stone bench sat beneath an old oak, hidden from the main paths. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them together, hard, and tried to slow her breathing. It did not help. The mark on her wrist burned hotter now, as though it knew he was coming. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. Steady, unhurried, the kind of walk that belonged to a man who did not need to chase because nothing ever ran far enough. Calla lifted her chin and turned to face him. Cassian stepped into the clearing, alone. He had not brought his beta, had not summoned witnesses, just him, tall and solid in the morning light, his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her wolf press closer to the surface. He stopped a few paces away, giving her space she had not asked for but needed anyway. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Cassian's gaze dropped to her wrist. "May I see it?" His voice was calm, gentle, even, but beneath it, she heard the alpha. The command wrapped in courtesy. Calla's jaw tightened. "You already know what it is." "I do." He took one step closer, his hands loose at his sides. "But I would like to see it all the same." She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him this changed nothing, that a mark did not erase the truth of who she was or what she lacked. But her wolf was quiet now, watchful, and something in his stillness made her hesitate. Slowly, she pulled back her sleeve. The silver mark gleamed in the dappled sunlight, every line clear and bright. The crescent moon, the scattered stars, the wolf mid-leap, caught forever in motion. Cassian's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or recognition. He lifted one hand, palm up, a question without words. Calla hesitated, then placed her wrist in his hand. His fingers closed around it, careful and warm, and the burning under her skin eased just slightly. He traced the edge of the mark with his thumb, his touch feather-light, and Calla felt her breath catch despite herself. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. She pulled her hand back. "It's a mistake." "No." His voice was firm now, no room for argument. "It's not." Calla wrapped her arms around herself and took a step back. "I rejected you, Cassian. Last night, in front of everyone. I said no." "You did." He nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "And I heard you." "Then why is this here?" She held up her wrist. Anger and fear tangled so tight in her chest she could not tell them apart. "Why would the bond mark me if I refused it?" Cassian was quiet for a moment, his jaw working as though he was weighing his words. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "Because your wolf chose differently," Calla flinched. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "It's not. But it's the truth." She turned away, staring at the roses climbing the garden wall. They were wild and tangled, thorns sharp enough to draw blood. "I don't want this." "I know." His honesty surprised her. She looked back at him, searching his face for frustration or disappointment, but found only patience. "Then let me go," she said, voice breaking. "Tell the pack it was a mistake. Tell them the bond didn't take. Let me go back to my cottage and pretend this never happened." Cassian's expression softened, and for the first time since he had followed her into the garden, she saw something that looked like regret. "I can't do that, Calla." "Why not?" "Because pack law binds us now." He took a slow breath, and she could see the weight of it in his shoulders. The mark appeared. The pack saw it. "That makes you mine, under every law we hold." "I'm not yours." The words came out sharper than she meant, but she did not take them back. Not by choice, Cassian said quietly, but by bond, and that means rivals will come. Calla blinked. What? You're unmated, marked, but unclaimed. He stepped closer, and this time there was urgency beneath his calm. Every alpha within 3 territories will have heard by now. Word travels fast, and an unclaimed mate is... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Vulnerable. Her stomach dropped. You're saying someone will try to take me. I'm saying someone will try to challenge the bond. His gray eyes held hers, steady and sure. And if you refuse my protection claim, pack law says I can't stop them. Calla's pulse hammered in her throat. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to keep you safe. By trapping me. Cassian's jaw tightened, the first crack in his composure. By offering you a choice you didn't have before. I had a choice last night, Calla shot back. And I made it. And your wolf made hers. His voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. I didn't ask for this either, Calla. I didn't force the bond or orchestrate the mark. But it's here now, and ignoring it won't make it go away. She stared at him, chest heaving, and saw the truth of it in his eyes. He was angry, yes, but not at her. At the situation. At the laws that bound them both. At fate, maybe? Calla swallowed hard and forced herself to speak. You think I did this on purpose? Cassian shook his head. No. I think your wolf recognized something you're not ready to see. And what's that? He held her gaze, unflinching. That you belong here. With me. Whether you believe it yet or not. The words landed like a blow, and Calla felt her wolf surge in response, warm and certain, and entirely too pleased. She took another step back, shaking her head. I don't belong anywhere. You're wrong. You don't know me. I know enough. Cassian's voice gentled again, and he moved closer, closing the space between them with the kind of care someone might use approaching a wounded animal. I know you're brave. I know you're stubborn. I know you think you're not good enough. And I know that's a lie you've been telling yourself so long you've started to believe it. Calla's throat burned. Stop. I know you're afraid, he continued, his voice low and steady. And I know you think accepting me means losing yourself. But it doesn't, Calla. It never did. She wanted to argue. Wanted to push him away, to run back to her cottage and bar the door, and pretend the world outside did not exist. But the mark on her wrist was warm now, no longer burning, and her wolf had gone quiet in a way that felt too much like peace. I can't do this, she whispered. Cassian stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the steady pull of the bond humming between them. Then tell me what you need. She looked up at him, and the kindness in his eyes nearly undid her. Time. He nodded slowly. I can give you time, but not much. If a rival comes to the border, the law requires me to let him make his case. And if you haven't accepted my claim by then, what happens? You'll be forced to choose between us. His voice was tight now, controlled. In front of the pack. In front of the council. And if you choose him, I won't be able to stop it. Calla's breath left her in a rush. That's barbaric. That's tradition. Cassian's mouth twisted, bitter. And tradition doesn't care about fairness. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to think. But her mind was a storm of fear and anger, and something else she did not want to name. When she finally looked at him again, his expression had softened. I'm not asking you to love me, Calla, he said quietly. Not yet. I'm asking you to let me protect you. That's all. Protection comes with a price. It does. He did not lie to her, and she was grateful for that. But the price of refusing it is higher. Calla closed her eyes, her wolf pressing against her ribs, urging her toward him. She hated this. Hated the way her body wanted to lean into his, the way her pulse calmed when he was near. She had spent her whole life keeping herself small, invisible, safe. And now the entire world was watching. I need to think, she said finally. Cassian inclined his head. Then think, but do it quickly. He reached out, slow enough that she could pull away if she wanted, and brushed his fingers over the back of her hand. The touch was brief, barely there, but it sent warmth flooding through her. And Calla? She looked up at him. I meant what I said last night. His voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. You're mine, whether you accept it or not, and I will keep you safe, even if you hate me for it. He turned and walked back toward the hall, his steps steady and sure, leaving her alone in the garden with a mark she did not ask for and a choice she did not want to make. Calla sank onto the stone bench and stared at her wrist. The wolf and the mark seemed to stare back, frozen mid-leap, caught between one world and the next, just like her. Calla spent the rest of the morning in her cottage, pacing the narrow room until her legs ached, and her thoughts blurred into circles. The mark on her wrist had stopped burning, but the weight of it pressed against her like a stone. She tried to read, to distract herself with the battered novels she kept stacked beside her bed, but the words slid past her eyes without meaning. By midday, she gave up and walked to the edge of the territory. The forest opened here into a wide clearing, the tree line dark and dense beyond. A low stone wall marked the border, old and weathered, covered in moss. Calla sat on it and let her legs dangle, her boots brushing the tall grass below. The air was cooler here, the wind carrying the scent of pine and earth. She had always liked the border. It felt honest, a clear line between one world and the next. She was still sitting there when the runner found her. It was a different boy this time, younger than Finn, with dark eyes and a nervous energy that reminded her of a colt. He stopped a few paces away, breathless. "Miss Calla," he said, and the formality in his voice made her stomach twist. "The Alpha sent me. There's someone at the north gate." Calla's pulse quickened. "Who?" "Another Alpha." The boy shifted his weight, glancing back toward the main compound. "From the Ashwood Pack. He's asking to meet you." The world seemed to tilt beneath her. She slid off the wall and steadied herself, her hands cold despite the warmth of the sun. "Does Cassian know?" "He's the one who sent me to find you." The boy hesitated, then added quietly, "He said you have a right to know before the formal greeting." Calla closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. This was what Cassian had warned her about. A rival. A challenge. And now it was here, real and unavoidable, standing at the gate and asking for her by name. "Tell him I'm coming," she said. The boy nodded and took off at a run, disappearing into the trees. Calla stood alone in the clearing, the wind tugging at her hair, and tried to gather the scattered pieces of herself. She could refuse to go, could stay here, hidden at the border, and let Cassian handle it. But that felt like cowardice, and she had already made too many choices out of fear. She started walking. By the time she reached the main hall, the sun had climbed high, and the air shimmered with heat. The courtyard was full of people, more than usual, their voices low and tense. Warriors lined the steps, their postures alert, and Calla realized with a sinking feeling that this was not just a visit. This was a challenge. She spotted Cassian near the front gates, his broad shoulders tense beneath a dark shirt. His beta, a man named Gareth with silver streaking his black hair, stood beside him. They were speaking in low tones, their expressions grim. Cassian saw her before she reached him. His gaze found hers across the courtyard, and something in his eyes softened, just for a moment. Then he turned back to Gareth and nodded. Calla climbed the steps and stopped beside him, her heart hammering. "Is it true?" "Yes." Cassian's voice was calm, but she could hear the tension beneath it. Alpha Rowan of the Ashwood Pack. He crossed the border an hour ago with a formal escort and a request to meet the unmated female bearing my mark. Calla's throat went dry. What does he want? To make his case. Cassian glanced at her, his gray eyes steady. Under pack law, he has that right. You're marked, but unclaimed. That makes you accessible. The word landed like a blow, and Calla's hands curled into fists at her sides. I'm not a prize to be won. I know. Cassian's voice was low, meant only for her. But the law doesn't see it that way. Gareth cleared his throat, his expression carefully neutral. With respect, Alpha, we need to decide how to handle the formal greeting. If you refuse him entry to the hall, it's an insult. If you grant it, you give him a platform. Cassian's jaw tightened. I won't insult him. That's what he wants, an excuse to escalate. Then we let him in, Gareth said quietly, and we follow protocol. Calla felt the words settle over her like a cage. What does protocol look like? Cassian turned to face her fully, and the regret in his eyes was unmistakable. A formal challenge dinner. Tonight, he'll make his case in front of the Pack Council, and you'll be expected to listen. And then you choose. His voice was steady, but she could see the strain in the set of his shoulders. Him or me, the bond or his offer. That's the law. Calla stared at him, her pulse roaring in her ears. You're telling me I have to sit through dinner with a stranger who thinks he has a claim on me, and then decide my entire future in front of an audience? Yes. The honesty of it stole her breath. She wanted to scream, to rage at the unfairness of it all. But the people around them were watching, waiting, and she could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. What if I refuse? She asked quietly. Cassian's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Then the council decides for you, and they'll choose whoever offers the stronger alliance. So I have no real choice at all. You have more than you think. Cassian's voice dropped, low and fierce. You can accept my claim right now, in front of everyone, and end this before it begins. Calla's wolf stirred, hopeful and insistent, but she shook her head. That's not a choice. That's surrender. It's survival. It's giving up everything I am. Cassian looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes. The alpha who needed to protect his pack. The man who wanted to protect her. The mate who was bound to her by something neither of them had chosen. Then survive the dinner, he said finally, and make your choice when you're ready. Gareth shifted beside them. Alpha, he's waiting. Cassian nodded and turned toward the gates. Let him in. The gates swung open, slow and deliberate, and Calla's breath caught. Alpha Rowan stepped through, flanked by 2 guards. He was tall, though not as tall as Cassian. With auburn hair that caught the light like copper and sharp green eyes that swept the courtyard with a predator's focus. He was handsome in a way that felt deliberate, his features clean and symmetrical, his clothing immaculate. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. His gaze found Calla almost immediately, and his mouth curved into a smile that did not reach his eyes. Alpha Cassian, Rowan said, his voice smooth and warm. Thank you for your hospitality. Cassian inclined his head, his expression unreadable. Alpha Rowan, welcome to Silverpine. Rowan's attention shifted back to Calla, and she felt the weight of his scrutiny like a touch. "And you must be the one everyone's talking about." Calla lifted her chin, refusing to look away. "I'm Calla." "Just Calla?" Rowan's smile widened. "No family name, no title, just Calla?" she repeated, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. Rowan's eyes gleamed with something she did not like. How refreshing. So many in our world hide behind names and bloodlines. It's rare to meet someone so unadorned. Cassian stepped forward, his presence a wall between them. "The formal greeting will take place tonight, as tradition requires. Until then, you and your escort are welcome to rest in the guest quarters." Rowan's gaze lingered on Calla for another moment before he turned back to Cassian. "Of course, I look forward to it." He inclined his head, a gesture of respect that felt more like mockery, and allowed himself to be led away by one of the house attendants. The courtyard exhaled as he disappeared into the hall, the tension easing just slightly. Calla turned to Cassian, her hands shaking. "He looked at me like I was something he already owned." "I know." Cassian's voice was tight, controlled. "And that's exactly why you need to be careful tonight." Gareth stepped closer, his expression serious. "Miss Calla, there's something you need to understand. If you refuse Cassian's claim, and Rowan makes a formal offer, the law requires the council to consider it. And Ashwood is a strong pack. Wealthy. Influential. If they think an alliance with Rowan serves Silver Pine's interests." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Calla's stomach twisted. "They'd give me to him. They'd encourage you to accept," Gareth said carefully. "The decision would still be yours, but the pressure would be significant." Calla looked at Cassian, searching his face for answers she knew he could not give. "And if I choose you?" "Then the bond is sealed," Cassian said quietly. "And Rowan has no claim, but I lose my freedom." Cassian's jaw worked, and for a moment she thought he might argue, but instead he just nodded. Yes, the honesty of it broke something in her chest. She wanted to hate him for it, for the trap he represented, but she could see the cost of this in his eyes. He did not want to force her, but he would if it meant keeping her safe. "I need to prepare," she said, her voice hollow. Cassian reached out, his hand hovering near hers, and then he let it fall. "Merrin will help you. She knows what's expected." Calla nodded and turned away, her legs unsteady beneath her. As she walked back toward her cottage, she could feel Cassian's gaze on her back, heavy and constant, and beneath her skin the mark burned warm and insistent, a reminder that her wolf had already made a choice. Now she just had to decide if she could live with it. Merrin arrived at the cottage, just as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. She carried a dress draped over one arm, deep green fabric that caught the light like forest shadow, and a small wooden box tucked under the other. Calla opened the door before she could knock. "I was hoping you'd refuse to come," Calla said quietly. Merrin stepped inside and closed the door behind her with her hip. "I thought about it." She laid the dress across the narrow bed and set the box on the table. "But then I remembered you don't know how these dinners work, and I decided I'd rather help than leave you to figure it out alone." Calla looked at the dress, her stomach tight. "It's beautiful. It's tradition." Merrin opened the box, revealing small pots of cosmetics and a comb carved from pale wood. "The unmarked female wears green. It signals she's still choosing. If you'd already accepted Cassian's claim, you'd wear silver. And if I wanted to refuse them both?" Merrin met her eyes, her expression kind but firm. "Then you'd stay in your cottage and let the council decide your fate. But you're braver than that." Calla was not sure she believed her. She let Merrin help her out of her work clothes and into the dress. The fabric was soft and well made, fitted at the waist and falling in gentle folds to her ankles. The neckline was modest, the sleeves long enough to cover her wrists. Marin fastened the tiny buttons at her back with practiced fingers. "You look like you belong in that hall," Marin said softly. Calla caught her reflection in the small mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress made her look taller, more solid. Her dark hair fell loose over one shoulder, and Marin had touched color to her lips and cheeks, just enough to bring warmth to her face. She looked like someone worth fighting over. The thought made her sick. "What happens at the dinner?" Calla asked, her voice tight. Marin guided her to the chair and began combing her hair with slow, careful strokes. "You'll sit at the high table between Cassian and Rowan. The council will be there, along with the senior members of the pack. Rowan will make his case first. He'll talk about his territory, his resources, what he can offer you. Then Cassian will speak. After that, the council may ask you questions." "What kind of questions?" "About your intentions, your feelings, whether you understand the bond." Marin paused, her hands gentle in Calla's hair. "They'll want to know if you're capable of making the choice, or if you need them to make it for you." Calla's hands curled in her lap. "I'm not a child." "I know, but you're an orphan with no family to speak for you, and that makes you vulnerable in their eyes." Marin's voice softened. "They'll be kind, but they'll also be protective of the pack's interests. An alliance with Ashwood could bring trade, security, influence. If they think you're refusing Cassian out of fear rather than true conviction, they'll push you toward Rowan. Even if I don't want him. Even then." Marin set the comb down and rested her hands on Calla's shoulders. "But if you accept Cassian's claim tonight, in front of everyone, the law is clear. The bond supersedes any rival offer. Rowan would have to leave empty-handed." Calla met Marin's eyes in the mirror. "And I'd belong to Cassian." "You'd belong to each other." Marin squeezed her shoulders gently. "There's a difference." Calla was not sure she believed that either. By the time they walked to the main hall, the sky had deepened to violet, and the first stars had begun to appear. Torches lined the path, their flames steady in the still air. Calla could hear voices inside, low and serious, and the sound made her steps slow. Marin walked beside her, a quiet presence, and did not try to fill the silence with empty reassurances. The doors to the hall stood open, warm light spilling onto the stone steps. Calla paused at the threshold, her heart hammering. "You can do this," Marin said quietly. Calla nodded, though she did not feel certain. She stepped inside. The hall had been transformed. The long tables had been pushed to the sides, leaving the center open. A single high table sat at the far end, draped in white cloth and set with silver. Candles burned in tall stands, casting soft light over the assembled pack. The council sat in a semicircle near the hearth, 7 elders in formal robes, their faces solemn. And at the high table, Cassian and Rowan waited. Cassian stood when he saw her, his expression unreadable. He wore dark gray, formal but not ostentatious, and the torchlight caught the silver in his eyes. He looked every inch the alpha, steady and strong, but Calla could see the tension in the line of his shoulders. Rowan stood as well, his smile easy and warm. He had changed into deep blue, the color rich against his auburn hair, and he watched her approach with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle. Gareth stepped forward, his voice carrying across the hall. Calla of Silver Pine, unmated and marked. "You're called to hear the petitions of those who would claim bond right under pack law." Calla's throat was dry, but she walked forward, her steps measured and sure. The crowd parted for her, silent and watchful, and she felt the weight of every gaze. She reached the high table and stopped, her hands folded at her waist. Cassian gestured to the chair between them. "Please." She sat, and the 2 alphas settled on either side of her. The proximity of them both was overwhelming. Cassian's presence was a steady warmth, familiar, despite everything. Rowan's was sharper, more deliberate, like standing too close to a fire. Gareth raised his hand and the hall fell silent. "Let the petitions begin." Rowan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his gaze fixed on Calla. "Thank you for hearing me tonight. I know this is not a position you asked for, and I respect the difficulty of it." His voice was smooth, practiced, and Calla could hear the sincerity woven through it. She said nothing, only watched him. "I am Alpha of the Ashwood Pack," Rowan continued. "My territory borders 3 others, and we are known for our trade routes and our peacekeeping. We are a prosperous pack, Calla, strong and stable. I can offer you safety, comfort, and a place of honor at my side." He paused, letting the words settle, and Calla felt the attention of the council shift toward her. "But more than that?" Rowan said, his voice softening. "I can offer you freedom. You would not be bound by a mark you did not choose. You would come to me of your own will, and I would never ask you to be something you're not." The promise hung in the air, beautiful and impossible. Calla's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression calm. "And what would you ask of me?" Rowan's smile widened. "Only that you trust me to protect you, to care for you, to give you the life you deserve." He glanced at Cassian, and there was challenge in his eyes. A life built on choice, not obligation. Cassian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Gareth looked to him. "Alpha Cassian, your response." Cassian turned toward Calla, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. He did not look at Rowan, did not acknowledge the challenge. He only looked at her. "I won't lie to you," he said quietly. "The bond is not a choice. It's already here, written on your skin, woven through your wolf. I didn't ask for it any more than you did. But it's real, Calla, and pretending it's not won't make it go away." He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady and low. "I can't offer you freedom from the bond, but I can offer you partnership, respect, a voice in every decision that affects us both. You would not be a possession or a prize. You would be my mate, my equal, and I would spend every day proving that to you." Calla's throat burned, and she looked down at her hands. "I know you're afraid," Cassian continued. "I know you think you're not enough, but you're wrong. You've always been enough. And if you give me the chance, I will show you that every day for the rest of our lives." The hall was silent, the air thick with expectation. One of the council elders, a woman with white braids and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Calla, do you understand what is being offered here?" Calla looked up, her voice steady. "Yes." "And do you understand the consequences of each choice?" "I do." The elder studied her for a long moment. "Then tell us, what do you feel when you look at the mark on your wrist?" Calla hesitated, then pulled back her sleeve. The silver gleamed in the candlelight, bright and undeniable. She stared at it, her heart aching. "I feel trapped," she said quietly. "I feel like I've lost control of my own life." Rowan's expression softened with sympathy. But Calla was not finished. "I also feel—" She paused, searching for the words. "Connected. Like part of me has been waiting for this, even though I didn't know it." She looked at Cassian, and the honesty in her voice surprised even her. "I feel safe when he's near, and I hate that, because it means my wolf chose for me, and I don't know if I can trust that." Cassian's eyes never left hers, and she saw something break open in his expression. The elder nodded slowly. "And when you look at Alpha Rowan, what do you feel?" Calla turned to Rowan, forcing herself to meet his gaze. He was handsome, confident, offering her everything she thought she wanted. Freedom, choice, escape. But when she looked at him, she felt nothing. No pull, no warmth, just the cold weight of a stranger's expectation. "I feel polite," she said finally. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd, and Rowan's smile faltered. The elder sat back, satisfied. "Then it seems your wolf has spoken, even if your heart is still catching up." Calla's hands trembled in her lap. Rowan leaned toward her, his voice low and urgent. "You don't have to do this, Calla. You can walk away. Come with me tonight, and I'll make sure you're protected. No bond, no obligation, just freedom." Cassian's hand moved to the table, his fingers inches from hers, but he did not touch her. "The choice is yours," he said quietly. "It always has been." Calla looked between them, her pulse roaring in her ears. Freedom or the bond? Rowan or Cassian? A stranger's promise or a mate's truth? Her wolf pressed against her ribs, steady and sure. And Calla realized with sudden, aching clarity that her wolf had never been wrong. She had just been too afraid to listen. She turned to Rowan, her voice calm. "Thank you for your offer. But I can't accept it." Rowan's expression hardened, just for a moment, before he schooled it back into politeness. "You're sure?" "I am." He sat back, his jaw tight, and inclined his head. "Then I respect your choice." Calla turned to Cassian, her heart in her throat. He was watching her with something that looked like hope, fragile and fierce all at once. "I'm not ready to accept the bond," she said, and saw the hope flicker. "Not yet, but I'm not refusing it either." She took a slow breath. "I need time to understand what this means, what I mean. And I need you to give me that, without pushing." Cassian nodded slowly. "I can do that. And I need to know that when I do choose, it's because I want to, not because the law says I have to." "You have my word." The hall was silent, waiting. Gareth stepped forward. "The petition is heard, and the choice deferred. Under pack law, Calla remains under Silverpine's protection until she makes her final decision. Alpha Rowan, you are welcome to remain as a guest, but no further claim may be made." Rowan rose, his expression cool. "I'll leave at first light. There's no point in staying where I'm not wanted." He looked at Calla one last time, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. He had not given up. He had simply shifted his strategy. But before he could speak again, the door at the far end of the hall slammed open. A young scout stumbled in, breathless and pale, his shirt torn. "Alpha!" he gasped, and every head turned. "There's been a breach at the eastern border. Someone tried to take the girl." The hall erupted into chaos. Cassian was on his feet instantly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Who?" "We don't know. 3 wolves, no scent markers. They were waiting near her cottage." The scout's eyes found Calla, wide with fear. They knew where she'd be. Rowan stood as well, his expression unreadable. "How unfortunate!" Cassian's gaze snapped to him, cold and lethal. "Get out!" Rowan smiled, slow and dangerous. "I'm a guest, Alpha Cassian. And guests are protected under your own law. Not if they orchestrate an attack on my land. You have no proof." The 2 alphas faced each other across the table, the air crackling with tension, and Calla, caught between them, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This was no longer about choice. It was about survival. Cassian moved before Calla could process the words. His hand closed around her wrist, firm but not painful, and he pulled her behind him in one smooth motion. The hall erupted into movement around them. Warriors formed a protective circle, their bodies tense and ready. The council rose from their seats, voices rising in sharp commands. Rowan remained where he stood, his arms crossed, watching the chaos with detached interest. Gareth was already barking orders, sending scouts to secure the perimeter and calling for a headcount of all pack members. The young scout who had brought the news stood trembling near the door, his face pale. Cassian turned to him, his voice low and controlled. "Tell me exactly what happened." The boy swallowed hard. 3 wolves came through the eastern trees just after sunset. They went straight for her cottage, Alpha. Broke the door. When they found it empty, they circled back toward the forest. Finn and 2 others intercepted them before they crossed the border. Were they caught? No, Alpha. They were too fast. But Finn said... The boy hesitated, his eyes darting to Calla. He said they knew her name. A cold weight settled in Calla's chest. She felt Cassian's grip on her wrist tighten slightly, a reflex he could not quite control. "Did Finn recognize their scent?" Gareth asked. "No, sir. They masked it somehow. All he could smell was ash and old blood." Cassian's jaw worked, and Calla could see the restraint it took for him to keep his voice calm. "Send Finn to me the moment he returns. And double the eastern patrols. No one crosses that border without my knowledge." The scout nodded and fled. Gareth moved closer, his voice pitched low enough that only Cassian and Calla could hear. If they were trained to mask their scent, this wasn't random. Someone sent them. Cassian's gaze slid to Rowan, who was now examining his nails with feigned disinterest. "You think it was him?" Calla whispered. "I think the timing is convenient," Cassian said quietly. "But I can't prove it, and without proof, accusing him would start a war." Rowan looked up then, as though sensing their attention. He crossed the hall with easy confidence, stopping just outside the circle of warriors. "If you're going to accuse me of something, Alpha Cassian, I'd prefer you do it openly." Cassian released Calla's wrist and stepped forward. The 2 alphas stood face to face, the air between them humming with restrained violence. 3 wolves tried to take her from my land," Cassian said, his voice dangerously soft. "And you arrived this morning asking to meet her. Tell me that's coincidence." Rowan's smile was sharp. "I arrived under formal escort, following every tradition your pack holds sacred. If someone else had the same idea, that's not my responsibility. But it serves your interest." "Does it?" Rowan tilted his head, his green eyes bright with challenge. "If she's taken by force, the bond breaks. She becomes unclaimed again. I gain nothing from that. Unless you're the one who takes her." Rowan's expression did not change, but something dark flickered behind his eyes. "If I wanted to take her, I wouldn't send others to do it. I'd walk through your gates and claim her myself, and you'd be bound by law to let me try." The words hung in the air, heavy and true. Cassian's hands curled into fists at his sides, but his voice remained steady. "You're welcome to try, but you won't leave here whole." Rowan's smile widened. "Careful, Alpha. Threatening a guest under truce is a violation of your own code. Then stop being a guest and show your hand." For a long moment, the 2 of them stared at each other, and Calla could feel the violence simmering just beneath the surface. The warriors around them shifted, hands drifting toward weapons, waiting for a signal. It was Gareth who broke the silence. "Alpha Rowan, you're free to remain until dawn, as tradition allows, but I'd advise you to stay in the guest quarters. For your own safety." The threat was clear, wrapped in courtesy. Rowan inclined his head, his expression pleasant. "Of course, I wouldn't want to impose." He looked past Cassian to Calla, and his gaze lingered just long enough to make her skin crawl. "I hope you stay safe tonight, Calla. It would be a shame if anything happened to you." Then he turned and walked toward the guest wing, his guards falling into step behind him. The moment he was out of sight, Cassian turned back to Calla. His expression was tight, his eyes searching hers. "You're not going back to your cottage." It was not a question. Calla's spine stiffened. "You can't just—" "I can," Cassian interrupted, his voice firm. "And I am. Your cottage is isolated. The door's broken. And someone knows where you sleep." He took a breath, visibly steadying himself. "I won't risk you." "So what, I'm a prisoner now?" "No, you're protected." He stepped closer, and she could see the strain in every line of his face. "There's a difference." Calla wanted to argue, wanted to fight for the small scrap of independence she had left, but the fear curling in her stomach would not let her. Someone had come for her, had broken into her home, had known her name. She wrapped her arms around herself and nodded, the fight draining out of her. "Where, then?" Cassian's expression softened slightly. "My quarters. They're in the main hall, guarded, and no one can reach them without going through half the pack first." "Your quarters," Calla repeated, and heard the tremor in her own voice. "I'll sleep elsewhere," Cassian said quickly. "You'll have privacy." "I just need you somewhere. I know you're safe." Marin appeared at Calla's elbow, her face tight with worry. "I'll stay with her, if that helps." Cassian glanced at Marin, then back to Calla. "Would that make you more comfortable?" Calla looked at Marin and saw nothing but quiet loyalty in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "It would." Cassian nodded. "Then it's settled." He turned to Gareth. "I want eyes on Rowan all night. If he so much as breathes wrong, I want to know." "Understood." Cassian gestured toward the far corridor. "Come, I'll show you the way." Calla followed him through the hall, Marin at her side. The pack members they passed watched with worried eyes, but no one spoke. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. Cassian's quarters were at the end of a long hallway on the second floor. 2 guards stood at the door, and they straightened when they saw him approach. "No one enters," Cassian said. "Not even me, unless she asks for it." The guards nodded, and Cassian pushed the door open. The room beyond was larger than Calla expected, but not ostentatious. A wide bed sat against one wall, covered in dark furs. A fireplace crackled softly in the corner, casting warm light over simple wooden furniture. Books lined a low shelf, and a window overlooked the forest, shuttered now against the night. It was comfortable. Lived in. And it smelled like him, pine and earth, and something warm she could not name. Calla stepped inside, her heart hammering. Cassian lingered in the doorway, his hands loose at his sides. "There's a lock on the inside. Use it. And if you need anything, the guards will fetch it." Calla turned to face him, and the words came before she could stop them. "What if they come back?" Cassian's expression hardened, and she saw the alpha rise to the surface. "Then they'll have to go through me first." The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it settled something deep in her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. Cassian nodded once, then stepped back into the hall. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." He closed the door, and Calla heard the soft click of the lock as the guards took their positions. Merrin moved to the fire, adding another log and stirring the embers until the flames rose higher. "You should try to sleep," she said gently. "It's been a long day." Calla sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly weak. "I don't think I can." Merrin sat beside her, her presence steady and warm. "Then we'll sit together until you can." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly. Calla stared at the mark on her wrist, the silver lines gleaming in the firelight. The wolf in the mark seemed to stare back, frozen mid-leap. "Do you think Rowan sent them?" Calla asked finally. Merrin was quiet for a moment. "I think Rowan is the kind of man who's used to getting what he wants, and I think he doesn't care how he gets it." Calla's stomach twisted. "Cassian can't prove it." "No, but that doesn't mean he's wrong." Calla pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I'm so tired of being something people fight over." Merrin's hand found hers, warm and grounding. "You're not a thing, Calla. You're a person. And the fact that you're worth fighting for doesn't make you less than. It makes them see what I've always seen." Calla looked at her, tears burning behind her eyes. "And what's that?" "That you're strong, that you're brave, that you matter." Merrin squeezed her hand gently. "And that you deserve someone who sees that too." The tears spilled over, and Calla did not try to stop them. She leaned into Merrin's shoulder, and Merrin held her, quiet and sure, while the fire burned low and the night stretched on. Hours later, Calla woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall. She sat up, heart pounding, and saw that Merrin had fallen asleep in the chair by the fire. The room was dark, except for the dying embers, and the window showed nothing but black. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Calla held her breath, every muscle tense. A soft knock. "Calla!" Cassian's voice, low and calm. "It's me. Can I come in?" She slipped out of bed and crossed to the door, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. She hesitated, then turned the lock and opened it a crack. Cassian stood in the hallway, still dressed, his face drawn with exhaustion. The guards flanked him, alert but respectful. "What's wrong?" Calla whispered. "Nothing's wrong," Cassian said quietly, "but I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." Calla opened the door wider and Cassian stepped inside. He glanced at Merrin, still sleeping, and lowered his voice further. "Rowan's leaving at first light, as he said he would. But before he goes, he's demanding a formal answer from you. In front of the council." Calla's stomach dropped. "I already told him no." "You deferred. That's different." Cassian's eyes were steady, serious. "And under pack law, as long as the choice is deferred, he has the right to return, to petition again, to push for an answer until you give one." "So he'll just keep coming back?" "Yes." Calla's hands curled into fists. "Then what do I do?" Cassian took a slow breath. "You accept my claim, publicly, completely. That ends his right to petition. It ends any rival's right to challenge. And it puts you under the full protection of the bond and the pack." Calla stared at him, her pulse roaring in her ears. "You're asking me to bond with you. Tonight. I'm asking you to let me protect you the only way the law allows." His voice was raw, honest. "Not because I'm trying to trap you, but because I can't keep you safe otherwise." Calla looked down at the mark on her wrist, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her wolf stirred, calm and certain, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. But Calla's heart was still afraid. "If I say yes," she whispered, What happens? I speak a vow in front of the council. You accept it. The bond seals. Cassian's gaze never wavered. And you become mine, under every law and tradition we hold. And I lose myself. No. Cassian stepped closer, and the warmth of him surrounded her. You find yourself, with someone who will spend the rest of his life making sure you know you're enough. Calla closed her eyes, and for the first time since the mark appeared, she let herself listen to her wolf. And her wolf was not afraid. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. Ask me. Cassian's breath caught. Are you sure? No, Calla said honestly, but I'm choosing anyway. Cassian's expression softened, and something that looked like relief broke across his face. Then I'll ask the council to convene at dawn. And I'll do this right, Calla. I promise. He turned to leave, but Calla's hand shot out and caught his. He stopped, looking back at her in surprise. Stay, she said quietly. Just stay until morning. I don't want to be alone. Cassian stared at her, and she saw the war playing out in his eyes. Then he nodded, slow and careful. I'll stay. He settled into the chair Maren had vacated, and Calla returned to the bed. She pulled the furs around herself and watched him in the firelight, his profile strong and steady. And for the first time since the mark appeared, she felt safe. The sky was still dark when Calla woke, the kind of deep black that came just before dawn. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling around her. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the room in soft shadow. Cassian was still in the chair, his head tipped back against the wall, eyes closed. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, steady and sure, and felt something shift in her own. He had stayed. All night. Just because she asked. She sat up slowly, and the movement must have woken him because his eyes opened immediately, sharp and alert despite the hour. It's time, he said quietly. Calla nodded and slipped from the bed. Maren stirred in the corner, blinking awake, and rose without a word. She helped Calla smooth her dress and comb her hair, her hands gentle and sure. You're certain? Maren whispered. Calla looked at her reflection in the small mirror and saw someone she almost recognized, someone stronger than she felt. I'm certain I don't want Rowan to have any claim on me, she said. And I'm certain my wolf chose Cassian for a reason. Maren's smile was soft. That's enough for now. They walked together through the quiet halls, the guards falling into step behind them. The main hall was already lit, torches burning in their brackets, and the council was gathered near the hearth. Rowan stood to one side, his expression cold and watchful. Gareth stepped forward as they entered. The council is assembled. Alpha Cassian, you may speak your claim. Cassian moved to the center of the hall, and Calla followed. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her steps steady. The council watched in silence, their faces solemn. Rowan's gaze burned into her back. Cassian turned to face her, and the hall seemed to hold its breath. Calla, he said, his voice carrying across the stone, I claim you as my mate under the law of blood and bone. I vow to protect you, to honor you, and to stand beside you for as long as we both live. I offer you my strength, my loyalty, and my heart. Will you accept? The words were formal, ancient, but she could hear the truth beneath them, the choice he was offering her even now, in front of everyone. She looked at the mark on her wrist, the silver wolf gleaming in the torchlight. Then she looked at Cassian, at the steady gray of his eyes, and felt her wolf rise to meet him. I accept, she said, and her voice did not waver. A murmur ran through the council, quiet and approving. Gareth stepped forward, holding a length of silver cord. "Join hands," he said. Calla placed her hand in Cassian's, and he closed his fingers around hers, warm and strong. Gareth wound the cord around their joined hands, binding them together. "By the old laws and the blood of the pack," Gareth said, "I witness this bond. Speak now if any would challenge it." Calla's breath caught. She felt Rowan shift behind her, and for a terrible moment, she thought he would speak. But the hall remained silent. Gareth nodded and stepped back. "Then it is done. The bond is sealed." The cord around their hands began to glow, faint silver light spreading from the weave into their skin. Calla gasped as warmth flooded through her, starting at her wrist and spreading up her arm, into her chest, wrapping around her heart. The mark on her wrist blazed bright, and she felt the bond settle into place, solid and unbreakable. Cassian's grip tightened, and she looked up to find him watching her with something that looked like wonder. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. She nodded, unable to speak. She could feel him now, a presence at the edge of her mind, steady and protective. Not intrusive, not overwhelming, just there, like a hand on her shoulder in the dark. Gareth unwound the cord, and Cassian lifted her hand to his lips. The kiss was gentle, reverent, and the touch sent another wave of warmth through her. The pack members in the hall began to murmur approval, voices rising in quiet celebration. Merrin was smiling, tears shining in her eyes. But Rowan's expression was cold fury. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "You've made your choice, then. I hope you don't regret it." Cassian turned to face him, still holding Calla's hand. "She's made her choice. Honor it." Rowan's smile was sharp and humorless. "Oh, I will. But the law works both ways, Alpha Cassian. She's yours now, which means her safety is your responsibility. If anything happens to her, the fault is yours alone." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Cassian's voice was low and dangerous. "If you come for her again, you won't leave my land alive." Rowan inclined his head, the gesture mocking. "I'll take my leave then, before the hospitality wears any thinner." He turned and strode toward the doors, his guards falling into step behind him. The pack members parted to let him pass, their faces hard and watchful. The moment the doors closed behind him, the tension in the hall broke. Voices rose in earnest celebration now, and pack members came forward to offer their congratulations. Calla felt overwhelmed by the noise, the press of bodies, the weight of what she had just done. Her hand was still in Cassian's, and she clung to it like a lifeline. He must have sensed her distress because he leaned down and spoke quietly in her ear. "Do you want to leave?" She nodded, grateful beyond words. Cassian raised his free hand, and the hall quieted. "Thank you all for witnessing. We'll celebrate properly tonight. For now, let us have a moment." The pack members nodded, smiling, and began to disperse. Merrin squeezed Calla's shoulder as she passed, her eyes warm with pride. Cassian led Calla through a side door and into a smaller room, a study with a single window facing east. The first pale light of dawn was breaking over the trees, turning the sky soft gray and gold. He released her hand and stepped back, giving her space. "How do you feel?" Calla wrapped her arms around herself and tried to find the words. "I feel different, like something clicked into place that I didn't know was missing." Cassian nodded slowly. "The bond does that. It's not just a mark anymore. It's a connection. You'll feel it grow stronger over time." "Can you feel me?" she asked quietly. "Yes." His voice was soft. I can feel your fear, your uncertainty, but I can also feel your strength, your courage. You're braver than you think, Calla. She looked down at her wrist. The mark was still there, but it looked different now. Fuller. Complete. The wolf, mid-leap, no longer looked frozen. It looked alive. "What happens now?" she whispered. Cassian moved to the window and looked out at the rising sun. "Now we figure out what this means. Together, at your pace." "And Rowan?" "I'll have scouts watching the border. If he tries anything, we'll know." Cassian's jaw tightened. "But the bond protects you now. Legally, he has no claim. And if he challenges that, it's an act of war." Calla joined him at the window, standing close enough to feel his warmth. "I'm sorry I made you wait so long." Cassian looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You have nothing to apologize for." "I do. You've been patient, kind, and I've been—" She trailed off, searching for the word. "Afraid." "You had every right to be." Cassian's voice was gentle. "I'm a stranger. The bond is overwhelming, and I'm asking you to trust me with your entire life. That's not a small thing." "But I do trust you," Calla said, and realized as she said it that it was true. Or at least, I'm starting to. Cassian's expression softened, and he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. "That's all I need," he said quietly. "Just give me a chance to prove I'm worth that trust." Calla leaned into his touch, and the bond hummed warm and steady between them. "I will." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, and they stood like that in the growing light. No words, just breath and warmth, and the quiet certainty that something had changed. Outside, the sun climbed higher, spilling gold across the trees. The pack began to stir, voices rising in the courtyard below, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, long and clear. Cassian pulled back slightly, his hand still cradling her face. "Will you let me kiss you, properly this time?" Calla's heart skipped, but she nodded. He lowered his mouth to hers, slow and careful, giving her every chance to change her mind. But she didn't. She rose onto her toes and met him halfway, and the kiss was warm and gentle and real. The bond flared between them, bright and sure, and Calla felt the last of her fear begin to ease. When they finally pulled apart, Cassian was smiling, and it transformed his face. He looked younger, lighter, and she realized with a start that he had been carrying his own weight all this time. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For choosing me, even when you were afraid." Calla looked up at him, at the steady gray eyes and the quiet strength in every line of him, and felt something bloom in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it, the promise of it. "I chose us," she said. Cassian's smile widened, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. She rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, and the bond wrapped around them both, warm and unbreakable. The council elder appeared in the doorway, her expression pleased. "The pack is gathering for the morning meal. They'll want to see you both." Cassian looked down at Calla, a question in his eyes. She took a breath and nodded. "I'm ready." They walked together through the halls, hand in hand, and when they entered the main hall, the pack rose to their feet. The sound was deafening, voices raised in celebration, and Calla felt the weight of it settle over her. Not heavy, just real. She was part of something now, connected, claimed, and for the first time since the mark appeared, she was not afraid.